Hello, and welcome to Simon & Schuster's Spring Authorfest. I'm Liz Pearl, Chief Marketing Officer at Simon & Schuster. Tonight, we partner with a wonderful group of book festivals, booksellers, and librarians across America to bring you an exciting evening with celebrated best-selling authors who will answer your questions and engage in conversation about their work. First, I'm delighted to introduce Jessica Knoll, the moderator for this evening's event. Jessica Knoll is the New York Times bestselling author of Luckiest Girl Alive and The Favorite Sister. She adapted and executive produced Luckiest Girl Alive for the screen, now a major motion picture from Netflix starring Mila Kunis. In 2021, she was named a screenwriter to watch by Variety, and in 2019, her original script, Till Death, sold to Amazon and made the blacklist. Her books have been published in over 40 languages. Jessica's new novel, Bright Young Women, on sale from Mary Sue Rucci Books this October, is a propulsive thriller that flips the script on our cultural obsession with serial killers and features Jessica's signature high-stakes, dizzying plot twists and several fierce, unforgettable heroines. It's unput-downable, and we are thrilled to welcome her here today as our moderator. And now over to Jessica to introduce our esteemed guests. Jess.
Thank you. Such a nice welcome. Hi to everyone. So weird. I'm told I'm speaking to about 2,000 people, which is kind of hard to imagine sitting from my desk. So I am so excited to introduce these two wonderfully talented authors, women I'm proud to call my friends. I'll kick it off with Rebecca Serle, who is the New York Times bestselling author of One Italian Summer in 5 Years, The Dinner List, and the young adult novels The Edge of Falling and When You Were Mine. Rebecca also developed the hit TV adaptation Famous in Love, based on her YA series of the same name. She is a graduate of USC and the New School and lives in Los Angeles. Next, we have Laura Dave, who is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Last Thing He Told Me, 800 Grapes, and other novels. Her books have been published in 38 countries and have been chosen by Reese Witherspoon's Book Club, Book of the Month Club, and the Richard and Judy Book Club. The Last Thing He Told Me was chosen as the Goodreads Mystery and Thriller for the year for 2021 and is soon to be a limited series starring Jennifer Gardner and co-created by Laura herself. It premieres on Apple TV on April 14th, 2023, which is so close. I can't believe it. So exciting. Hi, friends.
Hi, friends. We really are genuinely I know a lot of authors say that, but the three of us actually have very, very, very real friendships. So this is fun.
It's a little strange also that we're all doing this virtually, but we live we all just live kind of, Laura and I live a stone's throw from one another.
Exactly.
Rebecca's another 20 minutes down the road. But it's lovely to be doing this with you both. So excited about the paperback release of One Italian Summer, Rebecca's latest novel, which I absolutely loved. And I keep saying, as a thriller writer, had a twist in a romance novel that I did not see coming. So I'm always applauding Rebecca for that.
That's a high compliment from you.
And Laura, I'm just so obviously loved The Last Thing You Told Me. I binged it in a rainy weekend in Toronto when we were there filming Luckiest Girl Alive. And it feels like that was not even 2 years ago. And here we are. And the series is about to premiere. I'm so excited. The trailer looks incredible. So I'd like to start off, I think, about hearing from both of you about what the adaptation process was like, because all three of us had the experience of a book going to either the TV screen or being adapted into a movie, and that we've written those adaptations ourselves. We've produced them. And I just know from our friendship and the things we've talked about over the years that we've all had very different experiences. So maybe, Laura, we could start with you, and you could tell us a little bit about what the adaptation process was like for The Last Thing He Told Me and what it was like co-creating that with Josh?
Yes. So my husband Josh and I started working on that in sort of the heart of the pandemic. And people ask me about choosing to write the series with my husband, which as two writers living together, we're very naturally collaborative, but this was sort of our first experience actually collaborating in sort of a longer way. And I highly recommend doing that with someone you love. I recommend less doing that with someone you love in the middle of a pandemic with no childcare. So lots
Really?
of
That's
middle of the
weird. I
night.
wonder why. No, just kidding.
But it was really sort of this great experience working with him, and it's a limited series, so it's 7 episodes. So we got to sort of incubate it with just a few writers, really wonderful writers came on board and helped us. And I'm very introverted. I love being in front of my computer and working by myself. And Josh is very extroverted. He loves a set. He's been a screenwriter for 20 years. So he's a lot of experience with all
An
of
Oscar-winning screenwriter.
Yes,
He won the
exactly.
Oscar for Spotlight. An
Yes.
incredible film.
Yes. So which he cut me from, by the way. So
What do you mean? He cut you
Yeah, what do
from?
you mean?
I
don't know
had
that
a
story.
line in Spotlight.
Oh,
Mr. Conley, you're needed.
wow,
in the
that is
room."
savage.
I know. I still think about it. And so, but I got him back because a spoiler here is that in the finale of the last thing he told me, we had a quick cameo. Jess, you had a great cameo, which is quite memorable. Ours was quite quick, but I cut us from the show. So Josh is like, anything to get me back.
You've been
So that's
waiting to do that a long time.
a long-winded way of saying it was a really wonderful experience working on him with that.
My cameo was also cut from the pilot of Famous in Love. I don't remember
Was it?
exactly. Yeah, I had it there's like a scene in the pilot where they're having this pool party, or it's a scene at like a hotel rooftop, and I was talking to actually my agent who was there and filmed it with me, and the scene got cut. I don't remember exactly why, but
That hurts.
anyway,
I'm really sorry to hear that. I mean,
it's probably for the best.
what's interesting is before I feel like Laura and I became friends because we share our wonderful editor, Mary Sue Rucci,
Mhm.
and 800 Grapes came out the same year Luckiest Girl Alive did. So I felt like we were like on the circuit together, Laura, like
Yes.
right in 2015. But Rebecca, we didn't become friends until right before I left for Toronto to film Luckiest Girl Alive. That was summer of 2021. And you had reached out to me and been like, we should get together. And you gave me such great advice about being on set. I mean, you told me your feet will always be cold.
Right, always cold.
Get Uggs. You
Yeah.
told me to get a backpack to save
Yeah.
my back, which I did.
Yeah.
But I felt like you were just a wealth of knowledge. But maybe you could talk a little bit about not just Famous in Love, but like some of the adaptation work that you're doing for some of your other books, The Dinner List, In 5 Years, One Italian Summer in particular, which is your most recent.
Mhm. Yes. So I'm working on adaptations of all of them and writing a few, and it's a really interesting process. I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but I think I've said it to both of you, and I keep saying it to Erin, my agent, that
It's just the three of us here. So
right, exactly. The process is a lot like, I keep saying like I'm telling the same story again, but worse.
Oh yeah, I heard you say that.
Like,
That is very funny,
Such an
actually.
odd. It's because the book, I think, especially when it comes to film, I mean, TV, I think, is different. Famous in Love was so different than the books, but it was fun in the way that you got to really pull it apart, or I got to pull it apart and kind of like find the elements that I wanted to take with me and broaden out. And I mean, I think in those adaptations, what really matters is like the characters and the relationships between them, and everything else you sort of use, at least for that one, we sort of checked at the door. but with these three, they are more sort of like close to the book adaptations. And so it's interesting to think about like what you want to leave in and what you want to leave out. And for so long, I mean, we made Famous in Love. I think we sold that pilot in 2015. It was a long time ago, 2015 or 2014. And I would always say, like, I'm not precious. I'm not precious about my work. Like, it's fine. I love to like tear it apart, but it's not, it's a lie.
Yeah, it's a lie.
It's a lie. I am precious. And these books are very, very personal. And so part of it is really challenging.
Yeah. But I will tell you this, just to say this quickly, because I feel like, and I'm sure you guys get this question a lot from readers, and like, I can see it. We have a bit of a compiled list of questions that we kind of got ahead of time, which is like, how do you kind of throw your hat in the ring to be like, I'm an author, but I want to be the one to adapt it myself. And just like quickly on that note about like the preciousness, because like, that was something that, like, for whatever reason, studio execs have in their heads that authors are too precious for their work, like to adapt their work and to do exactly what you said, to like kill your darlings, expand on things, that maybe are better cinematically, whatever it is. I heard that refrain a lot about why generally studios don't like for authors to adapt their own work. And I gotta say, like, while it's true, like you are precious, I've also done I've adapted other people's books into, I'm adapting an original story by somebody else right now into a feature length film. And like, I'm precious about that. Do you know what I mean? It's not even my original characters, not even my original story. So like, I think anything you write, you're going to be precious about it, whether or not you're the owner of the like so-called IP,
Yeah, especially if it's something that matters to you.
Yeah, I would say like, if anyone ever gives you that argument, like flip it around and be like, maybe preciousness is like a good thing because it means I care,
Yeah, Hollywood.
Yeah.
And in some ways it is a little bit easier. I like briefly did a draft of the Jessica Darling book series. I did like a pilot based off of that, and it didn't end up going anywhere. But I loved that book series. And in some ways that was even harder because it was a series that I have loved since I was a teenager. I was so honored to get to do it, and I wanted to do it justice.
And then you feel like if my script had been good enough, it would have gone ahead. Like I've had that with, or maybe not. That's what I feel like when I feel like things kind of get killed. I mean, I think this actually brings us to my next question, which is like, in terms of like our varying experiences in the adaptation process, is like how long it takes. And like, it can take a really, really long time, or it can happen like this. Like last thing he told me feels like it happened lightning fast, Laura, but like that idea for the book came to you in what, 2003? And then you just wrote an amazing essay about how you had to shelve that. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. When I met you, Jess, I had just written the book that I threw. The last thing he told me, metaphorically, I mean, I literally threw it into a trash because I'm dramatic, but I had it on my computer and I put it to the side, and I have, I had been working on it, and I knew in my heart that there was the germ of something good was there. I think what people often don't talk about with writing is it's not binary. It's not that something isn't working or that something is working. It's that you're sort of mucking through knowing that something is working, but you're scraping at the wrong places to get it, to make a bad metaphor. At least that's what was going on for me with that book. And I just couldn't find my way to the story I actually wanted to tell. And I was up at a wedding in Sonoma in Napa Valley. And all of a sudden I looked at a vineyard, and, as it was, because there was no pressure attached to it, the first 50 pages of another book came to me, and I put this book aside. So the book ended up taking a long time. And then that 97,000 word draft, I think about 20,000 words made its way into the final iteration, which only came back years later after I had my son. And because I was struggling with another book, and my husband said to me, what if you made Owen bad? It was a suggestion.
Wait, what did he say about Owen?
What if you make Owen bad? And
Okay.
in my infinite kindness, when I'm feeling stuck, I'm like, well, that's just the stupidest idea I've ever heard. But what I did do was sit down with the book again. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, he's not bad. And this is a spoiler. So if you haven't read, maybe I
Yeah,
shouldn't say it.
spoiler
Okay.
alert, like mute
Yes.
us if you haven't
Yes.
read last thing.
But I said, what if he has to be sacrificed?
No.
So his
Mhm.
question led me to what I knew had to happen for him.
Yeah.
And then I knew what the story was. All of a sudden it was a primal love story, but not the one I thought I was telling. So it's so funny because the adaptation did come quite quickly. You know,
Right.
the book came out will have been out 2 years ago in May. So it'll be less than 2 years since the book came out that the show's coming out. But when everyone's like, that's quick, I'm like, I feel like that when Harry Met Sally, when they're like, oh, it took 3 months. I'm like, 12 years and 3 months.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
It also took a very long time.
Well, that's
Yeah.
why I wanted to say, because this is like the craziness of this industry where it's like, sometimes you do see those and just to say, we did get a note from someone in the chat saying like, please no spoilers. I'm reading.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Out, but we didn't spoil nothing
Yeah.
was spoiled, but I'm actually glad whoever that was, good for you for speaking up, because I was about to say something that would have ruined your life. So I'm sorry. Ruined the wonderful experience of the twist of this book. Yeah, I think that is what's so interesting is like, sometimes these things just go, right? Like all the pieces fall into place. You get the casting, you get the studio, you get the Reese Witherspoon champion producer, and it just goes, you know? The book's selling like gangbusters. The studio is like, all these things happen for you. And then here we are mere weeks out from the premiere date. But like, really, like this, you have been wrestling with this for years and years and years. So like, it's never as easy as it looks, right?
Yeah.
Or as it appears. And also I have no doubt, like the series will be amazing because like the DNA of this has been something that's been with you for as long as it has been.
Well, one thing I love, and not to, but Jess, one thing I will say that I was so impressed by with Luckiest Girl Alive in that adaptation, which is sort of a remarkable thing that doesn't often happen, is when things do take a long time, one of the first things that happens usually is that they say goodbye to the writer. If the novelist is lucky enough to be given a chance, and the easiest and first thing that often happens is, oh, if this isn't working, or if X has happened and this person's fallen away or whatever, we get a new writer. So it's this really extraordinary feat that you had managed to, and that you had producers and a support team that was like, this is your vision and you're going to get to see it through all the way through until we hit cut.
Yeah,
It's extraordinary.
I will
really
receive
is.
that. And I'm actually glad, because it's so true. And I only know that now. And I'm actually glad I really did not truly have a sense of that all those years I was working with it. Because I think if I'd known how common that was, it would have like shaken my confidence, you know? And like, I just think it was better that I was just like, you know, I mean, not that my confidence wasn't shaken many times over the years, because it took so many times and it had to bounce around from studio to studio. So that is true. Like oftentimes, like there's if they can't get it to move forward, they will bring on a different writer and just see. And like, that's not always a bad thing necessarily, because sometimes it's exactly what you said about last thing, where it's like, you like someone who's going to come in and the story's still there, but they're going to have an eye to something that like maybe you weren't ready to like open that door yet, and they're like, oh, this is the first door I would open, and it like takes off in another direction. But then also it can also just be a disaster. Like it's so unpredictable, and it's so not any one person's fault if it is, right? Like you have the writer, the director, the actor, the studio, how they market it. Like there's so many moving go getting a show or a movie made. Can you guys talk about like how involved you are in those moving pieces, like for your various projects? Like Rebecca, I know you've spoken to me about like your dream casting, and like feels like you would, like you're a producer, like you get a pretty big say in that, right?
Yes. I mean, I've had sort of every different experience under the sun at this point. With Famous in Love, that was a TV show and I wrote it, but it was also my first job ever in entertainment. Like I had never worked in a writer's room. I had never worked in TV. So it was this weird thing where I co-created this show, but then at the same time, I had absolutely no experience. I was learning everything for the first time. And then my first book, When You Were Mine, which became a film called Rosalind, just came out in the fall, and I had very
It's
little.
so adorable. I love it so
really
much.
Cute. Caitlin Dever
Caitlin
plays
Dever is
Rosalind. Yeah, she's
so good.
fantastic. But I had very little to do with that project, and not through like anyone's fault. I sold it. It was my first book. It
Mhm.
was a very different sort of like era of my career. I was really young. I wasn't that interested in the things I am now. And to our point of things taking an eternity, I mean, that one we sold in 2010 and it just came out in 2022. So, and that one I really just like showed up to the premiere and was really happy to watch it and, excited about the fact that it got made, but it had really, truly almost nothing to do with me. And now with these 3 adaptations, I am like very intimately involved. I'm producing all of them. I'm writing some of them. So, but I've had every different experience and I prefer the one where I'm at the center now, mostly because I now feel like I have something to contribute. I think that used to not be the case, but now it is. And it feels good to be able to come from that place with it. So, but I really like kind of had it all.
Mm.
I like that note that like now you feel like you have something to contribute, because it's like I now realize, I mean, the writing process, I knew I could contribute that, but in terms of like casting, like DP ideas, like people you want to actually work with on set behind the camera who are like so integral to the production of something, it's like now I finally have a sense of what makes a good experience, what makes, the kind of look of the thing that you want. Laura, like you're co-showrunner of the show, like, and the difference between like TV and film is like the showrunner is like, in a lot of cases, I hope I don't like piss anyone off by saying this, but like you are a higher elevation than the director, right? Whereas for film, it's like, it's still the director. Hopefully you get a director who is like, wants to work with the writer or wants to work with the author, keep their vision in mind, keep them in mind. I was lucky enough to have that experience with Luckiest Girl. But with a show, it's like, if you're like, they're crunching ice and it's not loud enough, like turn up the sound on that crunch, like they have to do it essentially, right? Like you're calling the shots.
What I found so interesting, which I wasn't, and it's so funny because you can watch your spouse sort of do something over the years and think you have an idea about what goes on. And then you're doing it and you're like, oh, I didn't understand what goes on. And what I didn't understand about, something that I actually think is really interesting about the idea of like a writer being replaced in films. Can you imagine if with one of our novels, if our editors said to us, like in the middle of writing it, like, I don't think this is exactly working. I'm going to give this over to Rebecca. And
no, that does put into perspective how actually kind of insane that is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But I think what I didn't fully appreciate, and Josh would joke with me while we were going through this, was like, when we were in the middle of shooting, I kept being like, we're done in 10 days. Like I kept thinking it was over. And he kept saying, well, then we have post. And
post is so much work.
And post is, in some ways, it's like you're rewriting things. It's editing. And so I think really with TV, it's like, and with movies, it's who is in the editing room, and it's usually the director. And with TV, really, it's the writer's cut, ultimately. I loved being in the editing room, because I think being in the editing room, first of all, as the introvert that you both know I am, it was me and the editor and a bowl of candy. So I was so happy all day. Yeah. And you're writing. It's a way to write again and reimagine and put things together. It's like a puzzle. Like I always think of novel writing as almost like I'm not a good puzzle. I'm not good with puzzles. I want to be, but I love writing for that same feeling of putting things together. And that's how I felt in the editing room. So that was my favorite part.
that's how I feel about reading, and thrillers in particular, is like there's something like very satisfying about like putting the pieces of a puzzle together, you know, which a mystery does so well. So there's something like, you know, or that's the conceit of a mystery, right?
Yeah.
So I totally get that and vibe with that, like 100%. I'm curious, like, I'm wondering if we should just like back up a second, and maybe Laura and Rebecca, you can each talk about what your, you know, kind of most recent books, TV shows, projects are about. Like Rebecca, like, will you tell us what One Italian Summer is about? Like, give us the synopsis, and then we'll move to Laura, just because I'm seeing from the chat that like people are like, I've picked up the book, but I haven't finished it yet, or I haven't read it yet. So I think let's sell it a little.
Sure. Okay, One Italian Summer. Wait, I have it here. One Italian Summer, our new paperback cover that just came out last Tuesday or 2 Tuesdays ago. Who could? I've been on book tour. I have no idea.
Time is a flat
Just
circle.
went on like a 10-day book tour. Like she just got home 2 days ago.
One Italian Summer is the story of Katie Silver, and she is a young woman who has just lost her mother, and her mother was her best friend and her first phone call, and all of those things that moms can be if we are very lucky in this life. The two of them, Katie and her mother Carol, had a trip planned to go to Positano, this place that meant a great deal to Carol, Katie's mom, when she was younger. She had this like really magical summer before she met Katie's father and became a wife and a mother, and her whole life really changed. So Carol unfortunately passes away before they can take this trip together. Katie decides to embark on this adventure alone. She decides to go to Italy by herself, and then in a magical twist ends up meeting her mother when her mother is 30, and they spend the summer together as two young women. So that's One Italian Summer.
Yeah, it's so cool. Just even, and that's, I feel like that's what you excel at, is like you come up with this kind of magical premise, and it's like the second you told me that's what it was about, I was like, that is fascinating, thinking about spending a summer with my mother when we're around the same age. Like I got like teary-eyed just thinking about it. And of course there's that awesome magical twist that like you have to read it, and truly it's like once you discover what it is, you're like, oh, like the seeds were there all along, but like it's very subtly threaded in. And
that's the thing I love about magical realism, is that
it's,
you know, you could tell this story, and you could tell a story about a young woman who goes to Italy and like meets people who her mom knew when her mom was young and there, and like finds letters that her mom left her, and she pieces it together. But why not just tell the story of her getting to be with mom? To me, it's so much more interesting to just get to cut to the heart of it. So that's what I find like magic can do.
It's fascinating. And so this is set up at the same production company that is doing
we haven't announced this one yet.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We haven't announced this one yet, but we no, I mean it's fine. We will.
Okay.
It's different. It's different, but One Italian Summer will also be a film. In 5 years is going to be a film as well. Yeah.
Laura, will you give us your little elevator pitch of the last thing he told me?
I will, and I will. And I also wanted to just say about One Italian Summer and all of your books, and it just occurred to me now, in hearing you talk. I remember when I heard you moderating Jess's book reading, and you were talking about how you don't love thrillers in general because they're scary to you. But what's
that was when I was doing her.
Yeah,
that's what it was. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
But what I actually think is really interesting, and I don't think I thought about it until maybe Jess said it earlier tonight, is that in your own way, you are creating a mystery with each of your books. You know, it might not look like, it might not have, I mean, as someone also who, you know, I struggle with writing violence. I wish I was good at it. I actually think Jess, you excel at it. Truly. And I write it and it ends up coming out like a handshake. But I think that there's something really interesting about that I just wanted to add to your description, that there's a mystery in the middle of it, that inside of that magic, that I think is really lovely.
Thank you. You're the best.
And speaking of not being great at violence, I will say that the last thing he told me is a mystery, but it is not there's not a lot of violence. I think in those early years, one of the things I was struggling with was in several of the earliest iterations, there was a shootout. And as I said, my shootouts don't quite work. They're too
They
friendly.
just keep missing each other.
Exactly. Exactly.
Just a little nick.
I mean,
Yeah,
that
just
said,
so
I love reading about violence, and like one of my favorite movies is actually The History of Violence, which I highly recommend. And I was
That's
thinking
a
about,
great
it's a
movie.
great movie.
I
And I
find
think,
that so interesting that you are attracted to that, but like
oh
don't
yeah,
necessarily want to like embody it yourself. Like that's interesting to me. Because
yeah,
Jessica, you're both.
yeah, you can do
Right.
both.
Or just
But
all of it. Yeah.
yes. But so this book actually started for me because I was subsumed by the Enron trial and completely fascinated
Oh,
by interview I heard with Linda Lay, the wife of the CEO Kenneth Lay, in which she said, "My husband's done nothing wrong," and I became really truly consumed by the idea of a woman who found herself living inside that paradox of thinking about who she believed her husband to be versus who the world was telling her he was.
mhm.
But I wanted her to be the hero of that journey. And
Yeah.
so I created Hannah Hall, a woman who was in that position, who her new husband, she moved to Sausalito recently to be with him. And she married later and waited until it was really her soulmate. And he disappears one day, leaving behind his 16-year-old daughter and a note that says, "Protect her." And the entire world is telling her he is guilty of something, and she believes something else is going on. And the journey of the book is for her to figure out what that other thing might be.
Yeah, it's a mystery, but it's, it's like a lot. I mean, you said this already, it's a love story. And I cannot think, I mean, when I heard Jennifer Garner was playing
Mhm.
Hannah, I was like, oh my God, like there is no other person to play that role. Like that is perfect casting. I did not realize, like, one of the questions someone submitted to me was that she had initially Julia Roberts was attached. She had to drop out because of scheduling conflicts. I didn't realize Jennifer Garner came to you guys because she read the book and loved it so much. Is that what happened?
Yes, so it was this really sort of amazing, which I don't think often happens, or my experience out here has been that happens. There's always a very, I think, I don't want to speak for you guys, you'll tell me, but when you start getting into the world of getting to imagine about casting and wardrobe and all those fun things, you start to get a short list in your mind of who you would love. And Jennifer Garner was at the very top of that for me, but that's a pipe dream. You know what I mean? You don't think, okay, like I want Jennifer Garner to be in it. I also would like to go out and win the lottery tomorrow. I have a lot of wishes, But simultaneously, she had read the book, and when Julia Roberts fell out, she actually wrote a letter to and she's spoken about this, so I'm not speaking out of turn, but she wrote a letter to the head of Apple. She wrote a letter to several people saying why she's so connected to Hannah and why she wanted to play the part. And what was so remarkable to me about it is, one of the things I love the most about the experience of writing is, on the other side of it, finding out what gave a reader solace in something that you put out there. And to hear her talk about the experience of feeling like all of a sudden you have to be the grown-up in the room. That unlocked for me how I understood the story moving forward in terms of the series, and also what I wasn't aware I was writing about in the book at the time I was writing it, which in its own way was really a story of grief, because there was a grief in that growing up, and realizing that no one is coming to save you, and that you're the one that has to save yourself. What is that going to look like?
Yeah.
That is incredible, because I can 100% see why she would connect that way with the character, because there's just obviously been so much written about like you know, her marriage and just like trying to co-parent and all of these things. And like, what an amazing thing for her to kind of find that in this character. And like everything I've heard from you, from our editor, Mary Sue, who visited set, is that like, there's no better human being on earth than Jennifer Garner, right?
I stand by that. You know, I feel like people, like she is brilliant. She was an amazing partner. Like you know, every project, there are many things I could talk about that were challenging about this project. She was not for 1 second one of them. I feel so lucky. I just want to make her proud. Like I love that. I think she's extraordinary in this role. And I just want, the best feeling is I think she's really proud of it. And that makes me really happy. I love her. I mean, I'm president of that family.
Yeah, this is a Jennifer Garner fan club.
Yeah.
The meeting of it. I see her.
My computer just fell.
Got so excited.
So close, guys. I was so close.
So excited.
So I'm curious, like that makes me think, like, have you guys, from your kind of perch as, you know, co-showrunner, co-creator, writer, have you guys experienced receiving notes on the character and their arc from an actor or actress?
I mean, yes, but I also,
and how do you deal with it?
That was such a sort of like specific time. I'm talking about Famous in Love here. And it was such an interesting show. I mean, we really built that show around Bella Thorne at the time that we did. And so she was an executive producer on the project, and she was just like very intimately involved in the creation of what that show became. And so it was just like, it was built with her. And so it made sense at the time in that context. The weirder part for me, I think, was being in the writer's room and hearing people say, well, like, you know, what's Rainer's family history like, or what? And I'm like, but I know the answers to all of that. Like, why don't you just ask me? Why do we have to like generate it all again? It was that part of it that I found really coming off as like a total stick in the mud here. But it was that part of it that I found to be more challenging back then.
That's so interesting.
What about you, Laura?
Josh has never met a note he doesn't like. It's the like, I will take.
Wow.
That's why he's so successful at what he does, honestly.
Yeah.
I hate every note.
He's collaborative.
The man loves a note. So one of the most fun parts of this, because it was the middle of COVID, was we have a backyard that is definitely my happy place. And we have these chairs like by a fire, and we would sit there with the cast and go through the script again and again, all the scripts again and again and again. So he could hear the words, he could hear how they sounded, he could make changes. If something didn't feel good to one of them, we could shift it, we could alter it, we could think about it together. So by the time we got to set, everyone had felt great, you know, there was no, and I know there's often different experiences, but there was no like on the day, I think we need to, we work this scene or think about this in a different way. We had, you know, we had worked it all through together as a unit, you know, which was really, that's a real tribute to him, because left to my own devices, I'd be like, this is the script and I'm so sorry if you don't like it. I will be in my room and someone else should go to set. Like I couldn't, you know, like, not that I'm not collaborative, but like, it's a different thing to be a novelist. Like to what Rebecca was saying, I think we have a whole world in our mind, all three of us, that we sort of see and we pictured. I'd be really interested to hear how it was for all the iterations on Luckiest Girl Alive too. You know, we had all, you know, I am struck, and it was joyful for me to get to watch Josh work that way, because I had heard, you know, from people like, oh, your husband's this way, but to see it firsthand, it was inspiring to me. You know, I really liked it.
Were you able to sort of like, yeah, I know you're inspired by that, but were you able to kind of like take it in and start behaving that way a little bit yourself? Like, were you able to sort of like model some of your own behavior off of how he does it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, and also I really think that I totally understand that TV and movies are a totally different thing than books. So like, I think I would have a much harder time if that were a novel, doing it that way, like any idea of workshopping a novel. But for a script, I don't have problems with it. I think what I learned and now is like, I think it's an ear thing. Like the idea of reading something out loud again and again and again, like that is what's so interesting. Like that wouldn't have occurred to me. And now I'm like, well, of course you have to do it that way. Like you have to hear it, like, especially once you get your cast, because they're going to say something differently than someone else's. You know what I mean? So, so that was a very long answer to yes, I do think so. Yeah.
I'm looking for long answers.
Yeah.
We have an hour. We have all the time. There was an interesting question in the chat that I wanted to ask, which is, with so many streaming entities, is there more need for good content to be adapted? Which is, I think that is a really interesting kind of thought-provoking question, which is like, there is so much content available out there. But how much of it is well done? How much of it do you want to watch? How much are people actually watching, you know? And the rest of the question goes on to say, like, is there a good time to pitch your book for an adaptation? Which like, there are a couple of questions like this, which is like, how do you even do this? How do you submit your work for adaptation? You know, which I think even like, we could even help reword those questions, because it doesn't even kind of to help just kind of like streamline everyone's kind of understanding of how this works. Do you guys want to talk about what the kind of nuts and bolts were for you in terms of like, okay, I wrote this book. Now, how does the adaptation even come about? Who do we hear from first? You know, like, let's talk everyone through that a little bit.
You want to go, Laura?
No, that's all you.
I knew there was gonna come a point when I was like, Laura's like, no, you take that.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, I feel like, Jess, I feel like you should honestly,
Yes.
I feel like you should answer this one, because I do feel like you are, I mean, like you're sort of at the center of a lot of different adaptations, both your own and others. And I know that like you're like in the process. I feel like,
I mean, no more than you guys are. I think it's just, I feel like maybe I talk about it a lot. So I feel like I've answered this question a lot because I've gotten it a lot.
Yeah.
My experience, and you guys can like jump in and say, you know, if yours was slightly different, but like in general, how it works, even just to even get the book published, right? Like in fiction, you have to have the entire thing written. Unless you're an already established writer, you know, like my next book, I, you know, go to my editor and I say, here's an outline, here's 50 pages of the next book. This is the idea. That's a different thing. But when it's your first book and you're trying to get a deal, you have to have the whole thing written. For fiction. Nonfiction, it can just be a proposal. So then from there, you need a lit agent. The lit agent is the one that takes it out and gets you the deal at the publisher. Then from there, your lit agent might also send the manuscript out to any producers or studio execs that they have relationships with and say, hey, I know you're looking, they have these relationships, right? So they would be like, we know you're looking for dynamic, you know, female driven thrillers. Here, this book would be perfect for you guys. And then they have to engage with you. They have to then, the studio or the producer, normally it's a producer, will read it and say, yeah, I want to produce this. So then you kind of go into business with the producer. No one is paid yet. The producer acts like your lit agent in that they then take it out to the studio and try and make a deal with the studio. And that's where the studio acts like the publisher and the financial deal occurs for all parties involved in the adaptation. Even if you're just the author and you're not adapting it yourself, you're still going to get paid because you own, that's your baby, and they have to pay you for the rights to that. even if you're not writing it, you're likely going to be, if you have a good agent, they're going to, make sure that you're a producer. So you're going to get a producer's fee. Now, if you are like, I also want to be the one to adapt it, it's a little bit of an uphill battle for some of the things we discussed earlier, which is like studios generally are just really gun shy about like having authors adapt their own work. But I think you just have to be like prepared for that kind of blowback. You'll get it, but I don't think you should take it to heart and be like, oh, maybe they're right. They've had all these bad experiences with authors trying to adapt their own work. Maybe I should let a seasoned screenwriter do it. I say, don't listen to that.
And
yes,
can I
Rebecca, you
say
raised your
that-
hand.
Yeah. When we did Famous in Love in 2014, like no, and this isn't to be like we were some kind of trailblazers, but like no authors were adapting their work, and certainly not in TV. It just like wasn't happening. And so what we did is I wrote the pilot on spec, which means that you write something, like you take the risk on yourself, you adapt your own work, no one pays you for it. There's nobody, like to Jess's point, there's no producers or studio, like no one else is involved. You just sit down on your computer and I wrote a pilot based off of this book. And once we had that piece of material, I had written it. So now it was impossible to not have me be the writer. And in television, then if you're the writer of the pilot, it means you're the creator of the show. So that is one way to do it also, where if like a studio, an agency, a producer loves this piece of material, they can't kick you off of it. Guess what? You created it.
Yeah. Also, I should point out, that is a thing that writers have done. Emma Donoghue, who wrote the incredible book Room, it came out probably, 8 years ago now. I did an event with her. Brie Larson won the Oscar for Room.
Yeah.
Emma Donoghue did the exact same thing, but for feature. She wrote the book, and then before it even came out, she wrote the script just to have it ready to go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I found this out doing an event with her, which I'm like, she's so incredible, and she wrote that gorgeous, gorgeous script and won her actress an Oscar, So yes, you can write things on spec. It's, I guess it's really no different than like writing a manuscript for your book, like no one's going to pay you to do that. Like you just, have to kind of carve out the time, which I know a lot of us have done, and then you start slowly kind of, upping your quote and, making connections and all of that. So you have like a little bit more kind of leverage going through, but the really, truly, you need a good agent, you need a good lit agent, and they're going to be the ones that help you get the book deal. And hopefully they'll be the ones to help you hook you up with a producer who is then going to be the person who's going to, take it to a studio and like, hopefully get the kind of wheels turning on an adaptation. But yeah, it's like, it's a lot of moving pieces, and there's a lot goes into it, but it's absolutely incredible, Laura, that like you and Josh like did this together, because I think that's the other thing about TV versus a film is like, it is much more collaborative, and like being able to like, I also just love that you guys have the creative relationship, even when you're writing a novel, where you can bounce ideas off of him, and like, I think that goes to show the importance of having some sort of writers group or having other like readers for your work, right? That you can like, that can give you feedback, that can give you, criticism, tell you what's working. Don't be afraid of that. Like,
And to that point, actually, and I'm just remembering this through this conversation. I can't believe I like blocked out, you can block out years. It's really amazing. But like, I think the idea of having someone too, to like mentor you in some way, like the first script I wrote on was for 800 Grapes. But the reason that the studio took a chance on me, because you want to get your own credit if you can. Otherwise, then it's very hard to get other jobs after that. But they let me adapt 800 Grapes. I worked with a producer, Temple Hill. It was for Fox, because Jonathan Tropper, another novelist who was a friend of mine, said he would supervise me. So what that really meant is it was a way that they knew there was a backstop. Someone was going to help if I needed it. And And that is like a really sort of lovely thing that writers can do for each other. They can come in and support. And, you know, he gave me some great advice starting out. He's like, the first time you use Final Draft, you are going to put your whole book in Final Draft and it's going to be 200 pages. I'm like, no, it's not. And sure enough, it was 200 pages. Like, you know, like you learn and then you're like, okay, but he did the same thing. And so now I'm going to learn how to do it. And like having a support network like that, I think, you know, asking for help and figuring out ways to create writing collaborations and collaborative experiences where you're supporting each other is so important. And it's one of the really special things. Like people can say all sorts of things about Hollywood and a lot of them can be true. But one thing I've noticed with novelists, particularly the female novelists I feel lucky enough to call my friends like you guys, is there is so much support. Like everyone is rooting for everyone in a very authentic way. And like, how can I help? How can we get in there? What can we do for each other? Let's do it. You know,
we're very information sharing, all of it.
It is that thing where like it was a boys club for a long time. And I mean, I have to say that like in my model was like Gillian Flynn, because the whole thing was like, I mean, I'm like in the real, like someone on here said you did the stormtrooper violence, Laura, pew pew. Someone wrote that in here and like literally I laughed out loud. Like that's your like violence.
Oh wait, I did what?
Oh, stormtrooper violence. Pew,
your
pew.
shootout.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? You have to like whoever wrote that, thank you. You have to crib that for further use. But like I've been a huge Gillian Flynn fan for years. And when Gone Girl came out, obviously it was such a phenomenon. And then it was like the whole thing was that she wrote it herself. And that was like 2012 to 2013, 2014. And that was around the time I was writing Luckiest Girl Alive. So I was like, I feel like I owe my career to Gillian Flynn, even though I've never even met the woman, but because I was like in the space that I was, like the context of the time that I was in and the person I was looking up to, I was like, oh, she did it. I want to do it too, you know?
So you don't have, like, you don't, those people don't necessarily have to be intimate contacts in your life. Like you can look up to them. And the other thing I want to say, because people might be joining.
You can stalk them, see,
stalk them.
Learn how they,
So just as like, no, but but the other thing I want to say is that like, if you don't have other writers in your life, you are a writer, all the people in your life have to be our readers in order to give you feedback. They don't have to be other writers. They just have to be readers, because we instinctively know when stories are working and when stories aren't working. And so don't feel bad if you do not have a community of writers surrounding you. You just need friends who read. And those friends will be as valuable to you as we often can be to each other, genuinely.
I think that's a great answer, because we have a question in here. How did you find your writers group? I don't have a writers group, but I know lots of writers who do, but I think that's a great answer. If the three of us don't have writers groups, we probably don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are Facebook groups that you can like reach out, but I think what you just said, Rebecca, is like a really important piece of it. Like, have a book club. You must have readers in your life. You know what I mean? Like those people can act as like, not your editor, but they're going to be able to read it and be like, couldn't stop turning the pages in this part. This was a little draggy for me, you know? Sometimes that's even better. Like just a reader who knows what's good and what they want, you know, when a story is good enough that they want to keep turning the pages. I mean, that's very valuable kind of eye to have on your work.
And what I would add to that also is, I think sometimes it feels like there's a lot of mystery surrounding writing. And something that I find very helpful and I reread all the time is a book called On Writing by Stephen King,
I love that.
which is, I think it's literally right behind me somewhere.
Mine is somewhere too.
And it's so funny. It is, but I think both of your books are also right behind me. But I will say that the reason I love it so much is he talks about it can be your first book or it can be your 8th book. And the bottom line is, are you sitting in the chair every day and are you doing your work? And extraordinary things happen when you're doing that. Nothing extraordinary happens when you're not. And, you know, like one of my closest friends is writing her first book now. I know it's going to be brilliant because she's a brilliant reader and she's so thoughtful about books and reading and writing. And so it can be disorienting and scary to write a first book. And I tell her in all sincerity, it's disorienting and scary to write your sixth book, but you sit down and you do the work and you find where you need to go. It's that's what it is. It's sitting there and reading and writing, and then bringing it to the people in your life and saying, as a reader, where are you excited? As a reader, where are you lost? You know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And someone is also asking about the process of finding an agent. So I mean, I think all of us, I think if you're going in cold, like my agent, I worked at a talent and literary agency when I first graduated college, and I was an assistant, and, you know, became friends with another assistant there who ended up staying on and being promoted to a junior agent in her, mid-20s. I left, I was working in magazines, I was writing, and she reached out to me and was like, look, I was just promoted to a junior agent. I need clients. You're writing for magazines, you should write a book and we can take it out and sell it together. So like, I had a very kind of unique experience there. But a lot of times, what are the books that list all the agents and their
Writer's Market.
That's
an amazing book.
Okay, anyone who's interested in the process of finding an agent, buy yourself, go on Amazon, or don't go on Amazon, go on Bookshop. And, grab a copy of Writer's Market. And it literally lists all the literary agents in the industry and like their addresses. And then what you do is you literally send your manuscript with what's called a query letter, where you're saying to them like, hi, this is my book. I want you to I'm hoping you respond to it. You would want to represent me. And the biggest piece of advice is like, any books that you admire or love and are similar to the book you're trying to sell in like tone or genre, read the acknowledgements of those books. And in those acknowledgements, authors always thank their literary agents. So then what you want to say in your query letter, really tailor it to that agent. You want to say like, my book is like, it's this book meets that book, and I loved these books, and you're the agent for this writer, and like that's why I know I'm a fit as a client to you, basically.
I think that's actually that might be the single most important advice.
Read the acknowledgements of your
acknowledgements.
Correct.
Yes.
Then they feel like you're not just picking them because they're
listed in writers.
Right.
Exactly. Or because they had a huge book, because they did Where the Crawdads Sing or what have you, like, that you're picking them because it's smart, because then you're going to people that are interested in the kind of book that you're interested in.
For sure.
Yeah. It's not a fool's errand. Like, you're narrowing down the list. It's super, curated. And you're just you have to think about how often these people are receiving query letters and emails and calls and like, wanting representation, wanting advice. You have to do whatever you can to like make yourself stand out, make yourself appear like a savvy author. Cause that's the other thing they don't tell you about writing a book. Like, even after you get that book deal and you've edited it and you've gone through all these things, guess what? You are expected to sell that book. I mean, you do have a publicist and a marketing team that's part of the book deal you get at your publisher, but like there are a lot of books that come out. They need authors that are going to be like really smart about like how to get their book out there into the world, and make people read it and make people buy it. So show them that you can be savvy.
True that.
Yeah. True that.
That's great advice. I know.
Guys, we're at 1 minute.
We're at 1 minute.
I don't know how I'm supposed to close this out.
Can I just say, I mean, everyone should watch The Last Thing He Told Me. I can't wait. Laura, I
cannot wait.
I love you so much. I just
April
think you're so remarkable. And also like, to anyone who's lucky enough to like be in your life, you just give the best life advice. I mean, I honestly, I text Laura or call her every day with some kind of crisis. And then everyone pre-order Bright Young Women. I am so excited for this book. I mean, personally, I probably can't read it because it will terrify the living daylights out
It
of
will
me.
terrify you,
can.
Rebecca.
I can, and I'm
Or
ready.
you can read
Yeah.
it.
I'm ready.
Yeah. So those are your 2 homework assignments, everyone
Yes.
who joined us.
Writers Marketplace and pre-order Bright Young Women. I love you.
Young women.
Okay, guys. Someone's saying, Jess, you can just say thank you for coming, and we will move to the closing slide. Thank you everyone so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did, clearly. Love you guys.
Love you guys. Thank you all. Bye.